Jeb Bush shook up his campaign again this week, canceling ad buys in Iowa and South Carolina and deploying almost all his headquarters staff to the early voting states. And there's growing talk in the Bush camp New Hampshire may now be a must-win state. Governor Bush joins us from Miami, and welcome back to Fox News Sunday, sir.
Thank you, Chris.
Let's start where we left off with Chris Christie. Your thoughts about President Obama's planned executive actions on gun control.
Well, I haven't seen them, but his first impulse always is to take rights away from law-abiding citizens, and it's wrong. And to use executive powers he doesn't have is a pattern that is quite dangerous. It's not a surprise that people don't believe that our government's working on their behalf anymore when you have a president that recklessly uses executive authority that the Constitution doesn't provide him. A better approach would be the approach that I had when I was governor of the state of Florida, where we focused on punishing people that committed crimes with guns, but we enhanced and protected the Second Amendment rights for law-abiding citizens.
But, Governor, let's talk about a couple of the specific ideas that it seems from all the reporting that President Obama is likely to propose as early as this week. Expand the number of gun sellers who have to conduct background checks. Expand the number of accused domestic abusers who are barred from buying guns. Governor, what's wrong with those specific ideas?
Well, because you don't know the details of it, but the so-called gun show loophole, which is I think what he's talking about, doesn't exist. People that want to sell randomly, occasionally sell guns ought to have the right to do so without being impaired by the federal government. If states want to create specific rules around that kind of behavior, fine. As it relates to domestic violence, the state of Florida, when I was governor, did exactly what he's suggesting. But this top-down driven approach doesn't create freedom, doesn't create safety, doesn't create security, and that's what we ought to be focused on.
But let's go back, because you're saying basically you agree with them on the domestic abusers, you just don't like the way...
No, because he can't do this by executive order, Chris.
I understand. You don't like the process.
I went to the legislature. I got it passed, and I signed it into law, and it was a good law, and people are safer because of it.
But what about the background checks? And again, we're not talking about the father selling a .22 to his son, but if somebody...
How do you know?
If somebody sells a few guns and wants to sell a gun to somebody, who does it hurt for the seller, or rather the buyer, to go through a background check?
If it's just an occasional question where you're getting federal license for a person who's going to sell one or two guns, I think that's completely inappropriate. We're a bottom-up country. We're not a top-down country, and he doesn't have the authority to do this anyway. If it's such a great idea, let him go to Congress. My belief is the best approach for this is to have these laws be thoroughly vetted at the state level. And that's why I'm proud of the fact that I have perhaps the most pro-gun, pro-Second Amendment record as a governor of any state in the country. It's why I was Statesman of the Year of the NRA. I received an award from Charlton Heston about 10 years ago. And we cut down gun violence at the same time. That should be the approach.
You started 2015 as the front runner with about $100 million in your super PAC war chest, but things changed during the course of 2015. As late as July, you led the field nationally with almost 18%. Now you're running sixth nationally with 4.3%, and you've seen basically the same drop in Iowa and New Hampshire. And all of this, Governor, while you and your campaign and your super PAC have spent about a third of all the campaign dollars that were spent in 2015, and you and your super PAC have spent double what any other Republican candidate has spent, which raises the question, what happened to your campaign this last year, sir?
Well, I'm going to focus on what's going to happen in the next month in the Iowa caucuses, and then 10 days after that in New Hampshire. That's our focus right now, and in South Carolina, and we're building a strong team. Voter contact is really what counts in those states. We're surging in terms of identifying voters and going at it. As you said, we moved many of the people in our headquarters out to these early states. Advertising in this world doesn't work to the same extent it probably did in the past, and so we're making adjustments. And that's what I'm focused on. I'm focused on my proven record and the need to have a person with a steady hand that can be able to take on these big challenges going forward and has specific plans to fix the mess in Washington, D.C. and grow our economy again and keep us safe.
But part of, if you're going to fix the mess in Washington, is learning from mistakes and fixing, in this case, your own campaign. And I guess the question is, did you squander the advantages that you had early in 2015? Did you fail to come up with a compelling message for voters? Did you fail to show up in the early debates, sir? I mean, I understand you want to talk about the future, but the past does give some indication as to what went wrong and what you need to improve.
Look, and Chris, I respect your world. Your world is all about process. My world is about connecting with voters in these early states to build momentum. We have a national campaign. We're going to be on every ballot in every state. That's a hard thing to do. Not every candidate has done that. And now we're focused on Iowa and New Hampshire. We've made the adjustments because that's the reality that we're in today. And I'm very optimistic that when people see my record and see the ideas I have and see my personality, my character as a candidate, and they can envision that someone like me can be president during these incredibly dangerous times that we're in, that I'm going to do fine.
But sir, respectfully, again, it is not about process. You talked about connecting with voters. I think the polls would indicate you failed to connect with voters in 2015.
Well, let's let people in Iowa and New Hampshire and South Carolina and Nevada decide that. Nevadans, I think, have a right to be able to make that decision, not the punditry class, and that's my point.
Okay. Back in 2014, when you were considering a run for president, you said the key was, could you campaign for president joyfully? And it's a theme that you repeated often. Here you are.
Can you do it? In my case, that means can one do it joyfully, without tied to all of the convention of the politics of the here and now.
Governor, do you still feel that way, that you need to campaign joyfully?
Yeah, and I do that. I'm excited about the future of this country if we fix a few big complex things. The joy in my heart relates to the greatness of this country. I believe in the greatness of our country, and I believe in its future, but Washington, D.C. is broken. And the joy I have is the prospect of being president to fix the mess in Washington and then work with Congress to fix how we tax and regulate and build a security system around us so that we can be kept safe again.
The reason I ask is because we looked at a couple of your recent ads just from this last month, and we found some clips on them, and I'd like to play them. These are ads not from the Super PAC, but from the Bush campaign in the last couple of weeks.
An Old Testament guy or New Testament guy?
Probably equal. One of the things that you didn't take an opportunity to do last night was to really go after Donald Trump.
Senator Cruz, you have not been willing to attack Mr. Trump in public, but you did question his judgment.
I salute Donald Trump. Jeb Bush was the only one who tried to go after Donald Trump.
I mean, you couldn't see them, Governor, but in the course of those ads, you attacked Trump, Rubio, Cruz, and I guess the question is, what happened to joyful?
You can be joyful and also point out the differences. I want to be president of the United States so that I can fix these things. And Donald Trump, I don't believe, is going to be the party's nominee. And if he is, he's going to get crushed by Hillary Clinton. And I wanted to point that out. He said some things that are just outrageous. His views on policy have shifted with the winds. He is a strong supporter until recently of Hillary Clinton, and now he's the front-running candidate for the Republican nomination. Someone has to call him out.
As we mentioned at the beginning, you have shifted really the third overhaul of your campaign in 2015. You have basically canceled all of your ad buys in Iowa and South Carolina. You've deployed almost all of your headquarters staff to the early states. Same question I asked Chris Christie. New Hampshire would seem to be terribly important for you. Don't you have to finish first or at least ahead of all the other so-called establishment candidates?
Look, I have no control over how you measure, who's up and who's down. I'm going to focus on doing the best I can, and I believe we're going to do really well in New Hampshire, and that's my goal. And I have a campaign organization in every state of the country. We're going to be on the ballot everywhere. This could go a long, long way. I have no clue about that. I just have to act on my heart and work as hard as I can, and I'm excited about the start of this new year and look forward to campaigning hard in Iowa and in New Hampshire, and in South Carolina and Nevada.
And final question, sir, you were the one, as the head of the campaign, who made the decision. Why did you decide to cancel the ad buys in 2 states, keep them up in New Hampshire, and basically get everybody out of the headquarters in Florida?
Well, based on the fact that, based on what we know, the Right to Rise PAC continues to do advertising on television, and we ought to be focused on voter contact. And so it was an adjustment based on the reality of where we are. That's how leaders lead.
Does that indicate that you're think you have less of a chance in Iowa and South Carolina and are putting more eggs in New Hampshire?
No, because we're excited about Iowa and South Carolina as well. Look, we want to go identify every voter and make sure they go out to vote. The way you do that is the old-fashioned way in these early states, and that's the mission and that's the objective, and I'm pretty confident about where we are.
Governor, thank you. Happy New Year. Safe travels on the campaign trail, sir.
Look forward to seeing you.